Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory. Today, we're going to talk about a case I stumbled upon as I was reading about another case. It took place back in 1929 in Hawaii, and it involves a Japanese family. Now, before I start with today's video, I want to say thank you to everyone who's been requesting over and over again soft spoken videos. I must admit I didn't like them in the beginning, but then I found a few channels and all they do is soft spoken, and now depending on what I'm doing is the kind of video I'm watching or listening to rather. If I'm doing stuff, I rather listen to a video that it's a little bit more up in volume, and so I wanted to include some soft spoken for those of you who missed them on my channel. There is this one channel that I love. She's a psychologist, if I'm not mistaken, and she has the most happy and kind of singy voice, and she has a lot of older videos with self-help, a little bit about anxiety, and her channel name is Green Beauty ASMR. So if you were looking for more, maybe you want to check her channel out. Of course, her channel is way bigger than mine. It's just a suggestion and something that I enjoy. For those of you that want to support my channel, I do have a Patreon, and I'll have a link for extra videos down below. I also have a membership, so if you want to listen to my videos ad-free, please check that link again in the description box or in the pinned comment. Now, life in Hawaii in 1929 was different from what it is today, especially for poor Japanese families. There was some racial tension between wealthy white people and poor Japanese people. And what happened in November 1929 would make things worse. Myles Fukunaga was the eldest son of a Japanese family with 7 kids. He was 19 years old, quiet, and responsible. He most of the time would stay out of trouble and work to help support his family. For Myles, it was hard being the oldest. He had extra responsibilities, and what his father made money-wise was never enough for the large farm family to survive. His dad worked long hours, but in the end, Myles had to drop out of high school to help support the family. He worked 80 hours a week at Queen's Hospital, but still he wasn't making enough. The family was behind on their rent, and it was stressful for all of them, but especially Myles. He was not only stressed, but was also he also attempted to end his life. When he felt humiliated and embarrassed. And to make things harder for Myles, he had a degenerative dissociative disorder. Back in 1929, and for a long time, this kind of mental illness overall was brushed under the rug and not acknowledged. One morning, there was a knock on the family's door. The mother answered the door, and Myles could hear her arguing with somebody from the Hawaiian Trust Company. They were there to collect rent, but the family didn't have the full amount. The rent was $35 a month, and they've been behind for several months. They had fees piled on, So now they wanted the full amount. If for this family was almost impossible to pay their monthly rent, paying a lump sum of what they owed was almost impossible. Myles was frustrated listening to this conversation, and then it turned into anger. In recent years, Myles had been following two crimes that were very popular or known. The first one was the Nathan Leopold, and the other one, Richard Loeb. This was the case of two teenage boys who kidnapped and killed a young boy using a chisel to beat him over the head. Then they sent a ransom letter to his rich father. The other case was perpetrated by William Hickman. He had kidnapped a young girl by showing up at her school and posing as an employee of the girl's father. He told the teacher the girl's father was in an accident and the girl needed to go with him. He took the girl and demanded a ransom from the girl's father. But then he killed her. So in his head, Myles thought he could combine those two crimes to commit the perfect one. So Myles called the Punahou school and asked to speak to the registrar. He told the registrar that he was calling from Queen's Hospital. He said that George Jamieson's mother was in a terrible accident and they were sending a car to pick up the boy. Using a uniform from the hospital where he worked, he posed as the hospital worker and got a taxi to take him to the school, where he picked up 10-year-old son of Frederick Jamieson, who was, by the way, the vice president of the Hawaiian Trust Company he hated so much. Gil's teacher and the principal later would tell the police that there was nothing unusual about the young Japanese man that picked Gil's up. description, young Japanese man that had slicked back hair and black glasses. Now Frederick Jamieson soon received a ransom note from Myles. It was kind of weird, quoting Shakespeare, like some lines from Macbeth, like, quote, "Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more," end quote. It seemed like he was referencing his desperation and the lack of enthusiasm of being alive. The note demanded $10,000 for the safe release of his son. However, Myles had no intention of releasing the boy. So before they responded to the ransom, Myles took Gil's behind the seaside hotel, where the International Marketplace now stands on Kalakaua Avenue, probably butchering that, just opposite the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. He put him in this tree area. There he took a hardened steel chisel, similar to the one they used on the crime he was following, and beat the boy over the head and then strangle him to death. When the media heard about the missing boy, the entire island of Oahu was in alert. Racial tensions flared. This was the son of a white, wealthy man, and the kidnapper was Japanese. Japanese businesses had to close because they were getting threats from white, wealthy people. Despite that, everyone was looking for the boy. The Oahu school let out early, and 20,000 students joined the search. The Jamiesons had a chauffeur, and they actually fired him some weeks before this, so he became the prime suspect. His name, Harry Kaysen, and police arrested him and was put under the influence of a truth serum. In those days, people believed that this serum would force people to tell the truth. Amazingly, it's still used in some parts of the world today. Despite all this guy we know was innocent, and the police found out soon enough and released him. Later on, Frederick Jamieson received a phone call from the kidnapper. A man said or asked him to meet him at a band concert on Thomas Square and to bring $4,000 and that he would give up the boy. He asked him to go alone with no cops. So Mr. Jamieson did as he was told and didn't tell the police. Myles showed up wearing a black mask. He took the money and disappeared into the crowd without saying a word about the boy. Jamieson paid the $4,000 in $5 bills. And being a banker, he made a note of the serial numbers. Police alerted local businesses to watch for the bills, and it wasn't long enough before Myles was caught trying to buy a train ticket with the money. When they arrested him, they didn't have to work much. Myles was ready to confess. At the same time, the police was finding the body of the little boy. Myles had covered his body with newspaper and a piece of cardboard. On the cardboard, Myles wrote something. Quote, "If you want to die, you have the right to kill others so that you, in turn, will be killed. The devil it is for you to decide." The arrest of Myles ignited outrage throughout the island. 20,000 people gathered outside the jail after his arrest. Police called the fire department and sprayed 7 streams of water at the crowd. The angry mob demanded a swift and powerful punishment. Police could not handle the pressure from the public, and they wanted this to be over as soon as possible. And Myles wanted the same. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang within 3 weeks. He was also examined quickly by 3 psychiatrists. They were appointed by the police, and they had 90 minutes to evaluate him. A typical case would require several days, but police felt pressure and in a rush to judge Myles. Psychiatrist with those 90 minutes determined he was competent and ready to stand trial. Myles admitted his guilt and asked specifically to be hanged. Prosecution was happy to. In a violation of his rights, though, his 2 court-appointed public defenders offered no defense at all, and they called no witnesses. Although he admitted of killing the boy, he was not allowed to enter a guilty plea. So they made him plead no guilty. A Navy psychiatrist offered to enter his testimony for the defense, but he was quickly denied. The jury appointed to the case included members of the search party. The man who dug the boy's grave, and even Frederick Jamieson's personal bodyguard. Despite several attempts for an appeal to show that Myles was mentally unable to stand trial, they denied all requests. The crime and conviction divided Oahu even more between white people and Japanese people. Japanese families throughout Hawaii felt a sense of fear and resentment for years after the crime. The Fukunaga family were constantly harassed. They ended up moving to Maui to escape. Myles was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and hanged at Oahu prison on November 19, 1929. Just after 2 months after the kidnapping. This story, which is a true story, is still told as a ghost story every Halloween to this day in Hawaii. Quote, "Until we have understood his personality so thoroughly and the circumstances of his life so fully that we can actually feel how he came to act as he did, we have not given him the defense to which he is morally entitled. We cannot discover to what extent society is to blame for this hideous crime, or what social changes we should endeavor to bring about. End quote. And that was by University of Hawaii professor Dr. Lockwood Myrick in a letter to the then Governor Farrington. Of course, a long time ago. I feel like even taking away the race of this person, if we don't say that he was a Japanese boy, it still is a violation of his rights. Sadly, I think in this case, Myles felt so out of control in his own life that he did something using the excuse and stress of poverty to do something that would put him in a situation where he was going to die. We know he tried and was unsuccessful, so he found a different way. Typically, I think it's easier for most people to agree on a harsh sentence for somebody who is willingly admitting to a crime. However, in some cases, like this one, it shows that there's a deeper connection between a mental illness and the desire of not being alive. I was reading this article that was saying if a person is really committed, will find a way. And typically is the way of least resistance. This is according to an expert in this matter. For Myles, this is what he believed would take him where he wanted to go. Now, of course, no matter who that child was, no matter who his father was, he didn't deserve to die or be put in this terrible situation. having money problems are the best kind of problems because you can always go out, work, make money, and solve your problem. But if you're sick, or somebody you love is sick, that's out of your control, and not amount of money or work can help your problem. However, in America today, maybe that rule still applies, but not everywhere, and not at that time. It was easy to find a good paying job. I've been out of the States. I've visited different countries, and I can tell you sometimes people are looking for jobs, but they simply are not there. I remember when I moved to the States in 2001. I graduated high school December of the year 2000. Got out of my last year, and I saw people graduating as doctors, psychologists, engineers, nurses, you name it, architects, and having no job. I'm telling you, well-prepared professionals out of school with 100 goals and dreams, not expecting top dollar for their jobs, and still the country being in such a terrible state, really, that people with a degree, 8, 10 years of university, finding themselves in a position where they couldn't find a job, and ended up working as taxi drivers because they needed to survive. Now, today in 2021, back home, the economy is not amazing, but it's not the same. People find jobs, they're willing to look, and especially professionals get their jobs. But I've seen it firsthand, what it is to really want to make ends meet and not being able to. I've seen it, and even though my family never experienced it, I had friends, neighbors that were in that situation, and when I read Myles' story, it broke my heart. To see how they suffered, even though they were working double the hours and reaching for the extra mile every day. Having said that, doing what he did or committing crimes will never be a product of being poor, but a choice by the person that commits the crime. I know people that were born and lived in absolute poverty would knock at our door for old bread when we were kids, and today they're doing great. You know, it's not, they never had to do anything crazy to get to where they are. So, giving you this little bit of extra information, I think, is to put you in somebody else's shoes and see how desperate it must feel to live in that situation, but at the same time to help us realize that no matter how desperate you are, it takes a specific kind of person to make the choice to do something like this. Can it be blamed to mental illness? Absolutely. It could be. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not trying to diagnose anybody here. But despite what the reason was, this little boy had to pay the consequences, and it became something much bigger because of who committed the crime and against who he committed the crime. I hope that you can take this for what it is, and I hope that in the times that we live today, with the things that are happening in Georgia, Colorado, and other places, I hope that even if you think differently from one another, we can all agree to disagree in the comments. I like to share cases that impact me, that help me reflect on something, and sometimes, not sometimes, always we're seeing some things in the past that are happening or connected or similar or related or remotely similar, that we see today. The fact is that the common denominator is humans, and as humans, we tend to get ourselves in a lot of trouble. So, no matter what you think about what's going on, I hope that this didn't stir anything in your heart to will upset you. This is a case that was shared in a book I was reading, and I thought that it involved things that are relevant. Poverty, lack of work, and other things that touch my heart. So, thank you for being here today with me. I hope that you join me Friday for a new whispered video. I will talk to you guys then. Thanks for watching.